Yeah, I mean, toxic empathy is ridiculous. It's so
Yeah.
antithetical to Jesus.
Interesting term. It's like trying to force a label onto something.
Yeah, but it is out there and it's influencing people, and that's why I think it's great to learn from you and what your experience has been as a Catholic. If Jesus were here, seeing the racism that I'm going to argue comes from a lot of people that would probably also say out of the next side of their mouth that they are Christian. What do you think Jesus would probably be feeling right now?
I can't put myself in Jesus' shoes, but I would imagine there'd be some sense of despair there because he's probably thinking, my father didn't put me on this earth to die for only one specific type of person's sins. My father didn't ask me to only collect disciples that were already inherently just like me. You look at Jesus's 12 apostles and where they came from and the different walks of life. You had fishermen, you had tax collectors, you had people from all over that he just accepted to be part of his disciples and his apostles. I don't think that he was specifically looking for one type of person. I would hope he's very disappointed right now because that's probably not at all in what he intended for us or what God intended for us. But I mean, I think the altruistic part of me is like, maybe this is all for a reason. I keep saying, like, there is a lesson to be learned here. That's what keeps someone like myself going. Is this really a true test of my faith? Is this really testing to see, can I continue to live by the golden rule, Christ like, despite all of this adversity?
Welcome to the Sacred Slope, where the slippery slope meets sacred ground. I'm Alexis Rice, and if you're new here, this is a global community. We're in over 60 countries now and in more than 1,300 cities. We are learning from diverse voices all over the world to expand what our Christian faith looks like. Here, we talk to queer pastors and straight pastors, men and women who are pastors, people across cultures, denominations, and lived experiences, those who exist outside of the narrow expression of Christianity that currently holds the most power, funding, and microphone in the United States today. That expression is just one lens. And globally, there are over 2 billion Christians across more than 45,000 denominations. At our core, our faith is rooted in something much simpler and much deeper. Love. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. You will know them by their fruit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. That's the lens we center here. Yes, this is a mostly progressive Christian space. It is open and affirming. It is anti-racist. It is grounded in both scholarship and lived experience. It is a place where women lead, where questions are welcome, and where science and faith are not enemies. Look, we're not all going to agree on everything. That's not the goal. The goal is to learn how to stay in the conversation with curiosity, with humility, and without fear. So wherever you're coming from today, whether you're Catholic or Protestant or something else, not practicing, you are welcome to be here and listen and learn if you're willing to lead with love. And today I get to have that kind of conversation with my friend, Johanna Ta. Johanna is a Catholic Filipino Chinese American, the daughter of immigrants. We both explore similarities and differences in our faith and what we can learn from each other along the way. As you listen, you're probably going to feel that moment, that internal, like, I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if that's true. I don't know. When that happens, I invite you just to notice it. It's not a threat to your body, but just notice it as maybe an invitation. Notice what your body's doing. And then take that feeling of defense and just interpret that as an invitation to stay curious, to stay grounded, to remember that you are safe and there might be something here to learn. That's what deconstruction is all about. It's about wrestling. It's about being uncomfortable. It's about learning. It's about examining what you were brought up with, putting it on the table, really thinking it through, gathering new information, and then figuring out your reconstruction journey. I'm born and raised Protestant through and through, but I must say, I know that the vast majority of us are in total awe, whether we're Catholic or not, of Pope Leo and how it feels like God has totally appointed Pope Leo for this time. So I'm so excited to talk and learn about Pope Leo from a Catholic's perspective today. I got his book, Peace Be With You, My Words to the Church and to the World. And this is what's so cool. No, I'm not Catholic, but there is so much in here that's so beautiful that I can learn from. So I wanted to start with an excerpt from Pope Leo today. This says, Unarmed and Disarming Peace. This address was given on Thursday, May 8th, 2025. Peace be with you all, dear brothers and sisters. These are the first words spoken by the risen Christ, the Good Shepherd who laid down his life for God's flock. I would like this greeting of peace to resound in your hearts, in your families, among all people, wherever they may be in every nation and throughout the world. Peace be with you. It is the peace of the risen Christ, a peace that is unarmed and disarming, humble and preserving, a peace that comes from God, the God who loves us all unconditionally. We can hear the faint yet ever courageous voice of Pope Francis as he blessed Rome, the Pope who blessed Rome, who gave his blessing to the world, the whole world, on the morning of Easter. Allow me to extend that same blessing. God loves us. God loves you all, and evil will not prevail. All of us are in God's hands, so let us move forward without fear, together, hand in hand, with God and with one another. We are followers of Christ. Christ goes before us. The world needs his light. Humanity needs him as the bridge that can lead us to God and his love. Help us, one and all, to build bridges through dialogue and encounter, joining together as one people, always at peace. Thank you, Pope Francis. I also thank my brother cardinals who have chosen me to be the successor of Peter and to walk together with you as a church united, ever pursuing peace and justice, ever seeking to act as men and women faithful to Jesus Christ, in order to proclaim the gospel without fear, to be missionaries. I am an Augustinian, a son of St. Augustine, who once said, "With you I am a Christian, and for you I am a bishop." In this sense, all of us can journey together toward a homeland that God has prepared for us. A special greeting to the Church of Rome. Together, we must look for ways to be a missionary church, a church that builds bridges and encourages dialogue, a church ever open to welcoming, like this square with its open arms, all those who are in need of our charity, our presence, our readiness to dialogue, and our love. And if you allow me a brief word, a greeting to everyone, and in particular to my beloved diocese of Chiclayo in Peru, where a faithful people has accompanied its bishop, shared its faith, and given so much to continue being a faithful church of Jesus Christ. To all of you, brothers and sisters in Rome, in Italy, throughout the world, want to be a synodal church, a church that moves forward, a church that always seeks peace, that always seeks charity, that always seeks to be close above all to those who are suffering. Today is the day of the prayer of supplication to Our Lady of Pompeii. Our Mother Mary always wants us to walk at our side, to remain close to us, to help us with her intercession and her love. So I would like to pray together with you. Let us pray together for this new mission, for the whole church, for peace in the world, and let us ask Mary, our mother, for this special grace. Hail Mary.
There's beauty in unraveling, safety in the questioning. Home is where you're wandering, you're right where you're supposed to be. You're right where you're supposed to be.
Welcome back to the Sacred Slope, friends. I'm Alexis Rice. This is Johanna Ta, and she's my friend. Welcome, Johanna.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited that you think of me.
We've been friends for years. We've taken dance classes together. We're both mamas. We have some mutual close friends, and we've been through ordinary sacredness of friendship. Johanna, you are a Catholic, and I am a Protestant, and so it's been beautiful to talk about our faith.
Yes. And actually, that is how we got introduced, was through our mutual friend. she said, well, you have to meet Alexis because Alexis is right there with you with the food allergies. That was, geez, just the beginning of a beautiful friendship, I would say.
Yeah, and that was, it was, geez, it was a lot of years ago at this point. Joanna and I actually recorded months ago. So much has happened since then in our world. Today is not, this is not a debate. That's not what we're having. We're having a conversation that leads more to understanding. We thought it would be great to give this a fresher take now that also Pope Leo has been in the role as Pope for a long time. If you're watching on visuals, we're going to have like different outfits and all that kind of fun stuff. Thank you for being here. Let's start with childhood. I'd love to learn a little bit about your earliest memories of being Catholic. What did it mean to you as a kid?
My family is of Filipino and Chinese heritage. My mother, Filipino, my dad, Chinese, grew up in the Philippines. As we know, as it stands now and has been for ages, probably since the Spanish occupied the Philippines. Catholicism or Christianity in general has been a very large part of shaping our faith as Filipino and Filipino Christians and Catholics and Filipino Chinese Catholics and Christians. A lot of that has also been embedded in our culture. We'll get into this later about perceptions and what we're understanding about each other's beliefs. Is a lot of us as Catholics or Filipino Catholics were baptized when we were babies. And the whole notion was to baptize a baby into Catholicism and Christianity is to remove that original sin. That's how we believe it as Catholics. For me, it was a very unique experience because when I was born, I was 5 pounds 7 ounces. I had pretty severe jaundice. At one point in time, my mom said that I had a 50-50 chance of living. So here I was in the hospital, in the NICU, in the incubators, 4, 5, 6, 7 days old. And as a Catholic parent, as a devout Catholic parent, my mother and also my father felt this very strong urge. We need to baptize her in the hospital because if things were to go bad, we want to make sure she makes it into heaven. That really was the foundation and what my parents have told me about my birthing, as you will, into Catholicism. A lot of it was born out of my parents really wanting to make sure that I was going to make it to heaven because as a baby, I don't know that I would be able to make that choice. I don't know if I would survive to what we consider traditional baptismal age, which is 6 months or so, right? 6 months to a year. So that was a very unique entree, as you will, into Catholicism for me. That was something I was always told. That was something that my parents always made sure that I was aware of, that I've always been baptized. And I was probably one of the first people I knew baptized because of that special situation. Growing up, my dad was in the Air Force. We moved around a lot. His family was starting to emigrate from the Philippines to the U.S. My mother's family, on the other hand, they took a different route. They all emigrated to Canada. And Canada, of course, has a lot of religions as well, but primarily there's a lot of Catholics. It was very comfortable for them to move to Canada. It was natural. It was part of our everyday vernacular to be Catholic. Moving around from city to city with my dad, it also was important that my parents really relied on finding community and finding centers of faith wherever we moved to. And so that was important. I went to kindergarten through 12th grade, really, as in Catholic school, because you just do it. And my parents would joke, and I joke. I have 3 children that are in Catholic school now. My youngest is about to enter kindergarten. And I always joke, hey, it keeps them out of Bible school on Sundays so we can have more free time on our Sundays, right? And so my parents used to joke about that too, right? You get your religion in the classroom so they don't have to deal with it. So that is how I grew up too, being in Catholic school, which is funny. I see that you're laughing because my perception is that Christians, it's mandatory for them to go to Bible study. Like you go to church and it's 2-3 hours long. And then you go to Bible study after that. My parents always sold it to me as it's amazing to be Catholic. 1 hour, you're in, you're out. You do your Sunday, you're in, you're out. You go to Catholic school, you don't have to do anything else, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if there was a definitive time as my first time of being Catholic. It was just part of me.
When you said in the Catholic tradition that you were raised in, that if you're baptized as a baby, does that mean no matter what happens in your life, that you will go to heaven? Does that mean that, like, for example, you don't need to pray like the sinner's prayer and ask Jesus into your heart in order to go to heaven?
It tracks pretty similarly to the Protestant faith, where I mentioned being baptized as a baby, particularly. And I'm not trying to say that every Catholic baptizes their children as babies. Let's debunk that right now. There are lots of Catholic families out there that are very much the same as a traditional, or what I consider traditional Protestantism, where you choose the faith. And you have this moment of revelation where you're like, I want to follow the footsteps of Jesus Christ. And I choose to be baptized. And there are many families that do that. In my family, it really tied back to the original sin, meaning the sins of Adam and Eve. The Catholics believe that every baby that's born still carries the original sin of our ancestors. We're all descendants of Adam and Eve. And that is what we believe. Being baptized, even if it's quote unquote as a Catholic, without your actually confirming as a person, because you're a baby, helps remove that original sin. Now, having said that, that's not an automatic entry into heaven. Absolutely not. Very similarly to Protestants, you have to pray. You have to reconcile with sins that you've made. You have to repent. You have to keep moving forward, keep learning from your mistakes. The 10 Commandments, like, we're still all under that same umbrella. We still are beholden to live a life free from sin. And when we do sin, as we all are sinners, we still have to pray on it. We still have to ask for forgiveness. You mentioned something interesting about being about 8 years old or so, where you're making this commitment and you're making this promise to yourself that you will say the Lord's Prayer and that you will ask for forgiveness and that you will repent and you will reconcile. Well, it's very similar in Catholicism. We have what we call the 7 sacraments. Baptism is just number 1. The second is reconciliation. And then there's communion, which is when we receive the holy body of Christ for the first time. Marriage is one. Holy orders is another one. Confirmation is another one. And I've skipped over that. That's when you're an adult, or you are adult-like in your faith. That could be 18. That could be 13. Where you're really confirming your faith as a Catholic moving forward. Holy orders like the Pope, or what we know as our nuns and our priests and anyone within that ministry. There also is a blessing when we're sick and when we're about to die. So those are the 7 sacraments.
So as a non-Catholic, I have really been deeply, deeply moved by the witness of Pope Leo. He's the first U.S.-born pope, a Chicago-born Augustinian with deep roots in Peru. He's a multilingual pastor who has consistently emphasized peace, human dignity, solidarity with migrants, and unity in a divided church, and a global Christianity bigger than nationalism. In his first appearance, Pope Leo actually opened not with this triumphant kind of approach. He opened with "Peace be with you," which was calling for an unarmed and disarming peace. In his first major address to diplomats, he said that the dignity of migrants must be respected, drawing on his own story as the descendant of immigrants and as someone who chose to emigrate. In early 2026, he urged cardinals to reject division and keep building a more inclusive church grounded in God's love. That matters because in February of 2025, Pope Francis directly rebuked the misuse of Catholic theology to defend anti-immigrant politics, rejecting the idea that Christian love is just a shrinking circle of obligation and saying that the true Ordo Amoris is the love revealed in the Good Samaritan, a fraternity open to all without exception. He has unmistakably carried forward the same moral witness: dignity over contempt, solidarity over scapegoating, and neighbor love over the idolatry of power.
It's a lot because, you see on mainstream media, or at least what we see here in the United States, you hear so much about exactly just this anti-immigrant sentiment, which it couldn't have come at a most interesting intersection of having this sort of, dare I say it, rhetoric, or having this sentiment be broadcasted across as almost nationalistic in a way, almost speaking on behalf of all of us Americans. Then you have this Pope who is an American by birth, like just saying, no, this is not what this is about. And carrying on exactly what you said about that rebuke from Pope Francis on that statement. And I will say this, acknowledging that this is the first Pope we've had that both is from the US, that has, quote unquote, by all intents and purposes, come from a traditionally privileged life here in the United States, born and raised, quintessential American dream. And then someone who's moving to the outskirts of Peru, living in a village, walking barefoot amongst the villagers of the area that are deeply, deeply rooted in their faith. Having that connection of somebody who can represent both worlds or both sides of that page, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful time to have somebody like that as a leader of our church, as representing someone who we think is, in our faith, is closest to the ideal Christian or the ideal Catholic Christian, what have you. Such a beautiful moment to witness in my lifetime.
It's one of those things where I've always viewed Catholics having like a really strong reverence for the Pope, the figure of the Pope. And it's, again, like there's so many digs. We'll talk about all the different digs that you hear over time. And you're like, oh my gosh, this really is potentially forming like some stereotypes that I have that aren't always like positive or even true. I'd love to hear what the Pope means to you in your life, the figurehead of the Pope.
A really good place to start maybe is to call out, in my opinion, or in my understanding, another key difference between Catholics and Protestants, and not all Protestants. And I will say, when I grew up, it was Catholics and it was Protestants. And Protestants was like a other, right? I knew that there were differences. I knew that there were Baptists and Methodists and Episcopalians. What I thought I understood was that Catholics revere saints, the original apostles, and other saints as well, more modern day saints, whereas Protestants didn't. And I came to find out that's not necessarily true. There are some Protestant faiths that actually also revere saints. And so I bring this up because it helps me to understand the Pope's role in Catholicism. And hopefully that's a little bit enlightening. Our understanding is the very first quote unquote Pope of the Catholic Church was St. Peter, one of the original 12 apostles. Right? So he was with Jesus, and, we know he denied Jesus 3 times during the Passion of the Christ, but he came to be one of Jesus's most faithful apostles, such that Jesus actually gave him this title of, "You are my conduit to the people of the world. You are most Christ-like. So I charge you as being the man, the leader of our faith, of this, at the time, very, very new religion, right? Very persecuted religion. He was in charge of that all. And so the whole idea of the popes is that these men of faith, are all quote unquote, because of our strong belief that St. Peter really led the Catholic Church to where we are today, we still need a leader on earth who serves as that conduit, who is a human, who is flawed, but is the most Christ-like, has the closest connection to God and Jesus, who can spread the word of what we need now as a Catholic faith, what we need as a people. And that brings me to that next point of like, yes, every pope is different. They're not all cookie cutters. Sometimes you'll get a pope that is, like Pope Francis. Our generation probably anchors the best to Pope Francis, even though we were adults when we had Pope Benedict. This new generation, this millennial generation, as you will, what we have, really relates the most to Pope Francis because of that's what the world needed at the time. We had, a lot of poverty still. We had the burgeoning, just the ideas of LGBTQ and tolerance and differences in faith. There was still a lot happening in the Middle East. There's a lot of conservative and liberal views. And the advent of technology was making everything run so fast that as Catholics, we could not wrap our heads around what is this lightning speed change that's happening in the world mean to us as Catholics. We're very traditionalists, I will say. Pope Francis was a breath of fresh air, right? He kept some of those traditions that made us feel culturally Catholic, but he was talking about new age issues, things that were important to people, millennials, people today. Pope Benedict was another one, pope that we had before Pope Francis. And I'll be honest, I didn't really feel a connection to him. I heard he was a great pope, very gentle, a shepherd, as you will, right? As all popes should be. But there were a lot of issues that were not resolved as a Catholic. There was still a lot of the notions about all of these taking advantage of the youth, pedophilia, and there was just a lot of this nasty stuff that was going on in the Catholic Church. When I'm not going to turn a blind eye to it. Absolutely, that was happening. Maybe it's still happening, unfortunately, but it was just one of those things that was shoved under the rug without an answer. At least that's how I felt. And even now with our new pope, man, an American pope, what have you? I was a little worried. I'll be honest with you. I mean, who can hold a candle to Pope Francis? What I'm learning more and more, and as I'm talking to other Catholics and other Christians, he was a pope, again, that we really need right now. We really need it right now. To me, as a Catholic, a pope is so critical because, again, he is our conduit to the church. And he does set the tone. He really sets the tone as to how I, as a Catholic, need to be living my faith and how I need to be towards other people.
Something that is tough when stereotypes come up is that they're driven in so deeply and then a lot of other things don't get, shown on them. So it must be difficult that you've got Catholic and then the pedophilia thing, comes up a lot with it. I will say that a lot of Protestant denominations, especially in evangelical spaces, are having our own massive reckoning with this. With the SBC, basically, there's been a lot of problems with what to do with a lot of the abuse that has been happening and also swept under the rug. It looks different, but it's still abuse. That has been a really big problem, and it has been interesting to watch figures like Pope Francis demand accountability. That is something that there are a good amount of Protestants really looking for in our leaders, saying we need accountability too. And the great thing is there's a model for this because abuse is, especially within church walls, is of the most heinous against the teachings of Jesus and against the heart of God.
Curious to know. So you've asked me about, I've always known the Pope as a leader of our church. I'm curious to know, as someone from a Protestant, how do you view the Pope?
I can't speak for everyone, of course. I would say
the idea of a Pope. You talked about how Protestants have leaders themselves. Well, I'll be honest, I don't know of any leader that is more prominent, maybe other than the Dalai Lama, other than the Pope. So I'm curious to know, what is someone that's outside of the Catholic faith, how do they view the office of the Pope?
There's a great amount of respect that this is obviously a holy person that obviously is a man of God and has dedicated his life to that. It's always interesting to see all the rituals around it because they don't connect with Protestants the way they would for a Catholic. So we see it from the outside as if viewing someone else's culture that you're not a part of. So viewing it with observation and interest. And I would think because there's a lack of reverence, I would say, because Protestants are well, we don't have to follow the Pope. A lot of Protestants, since we are fracturing into so many different ways of thought politically, that gets lost a little bit too much right now in terms of that this is a person of God who has studied the Bible and faith and has come to these conclusions that might upset some people. Because there can be no one figurehead that is not going. Even Jesus upset a lot of people.
Oh yeah. Did he?
We do. So that is just going to happen. But I would say that you can see it now with Pope Leo the 14th. I would be able to answer it that way from what I've seen from the Protestant world is if you are, let's say, more of a moderate or a progressive Protestant, then people have been like very excited about him because he is willing to stand up to fascism, authoritarianism, speak for the children of Gaza, carry on that legacy from Pope Francis, speak for the poor, speak for the things that like really resonate with a lot of Protestants who happen to feel that way. I have seen pretty angry reactions. Of course, they don't reflect everybody who's more conservative, who's a Protestant, but feel like, you've seen woke Pope, which is just so simplistic. Just because you don't like that he has empathy for everyone.
That idea of woke Pope, that's very interesting. It's profound that you had said that because, again, I mentioned to you, as Catholics, we believe that the Pope that is chosen by the Holy Spirit. Yes, it's elected by a college of cardinals. We don't know what's happening behind closed doors, but we can only assume there's campaigning that's happening. There's a lot of banter around philosophy and where they think the church is going. And maybe there's a little bit of a power play. Let's not deny that, right? There's always going to be a little bit of that. There's a little politicking that's happening. But you say woke Pope, and it's an interesting term because as Catholics, at the end of the day, we always believe that the Pope that is chosen is the Pope that we need right now. And maybe that's why there is a lot of incendiary comments, very polarizing comments that come out of that. Maybe because there is underneath the surface that realization that, gosh, is this world going to go woke? And that's not saying that the Pope is going to make everyone woke. That's not it at all, right? The Pope is merely, again, he's the leader of our church. And as Catholics, we can choose to go with or without what the Pope says. But philosophically and religiously, spiritually, because he is the leader of our church, having that fundamental belief is that that's what we need right now. Yes, he is going to lead us to focus more on things that matter, the poor, impoverished communities, the crisis in the Middle East and Gaza, tolerance of others, maybe a little bit of softening, a lot of the power play that's happening between leaders in the political world. Very, very interesting. That really tracks. That absolutely tracks. So it's not surprising at all. That's why people have freedom of religion. What we're forgetting here in the United States is that we have freedom of religion. Mm-hmm. Yes, we have "In God We Trust," literally, on our bills. We pledge allegiance to our flag. And there's that indivisible under God statement. Yet, as a nation, we're tolerant of other religions, where some other countries would persecute. You have to just take a breath and sigh and be like, yes. There's a lot of polarizing feelings out there, but at the end of the day, that's what makes us free is having that freedom of thought, right? Where it becomes dangerous, that's probably one of the reasons why we're here today, is that lack of understanding and maybe lack of reverence and respect of the differences.
I would love to ask you more about your faith as a parent. So you are a mama of 3, and I'm just curious to learn a little bit more about your faith journey and how that has evolved over time.
I have 3 boys. I've got one that's in middle school, about to graduate, one that's about to enter middle school, and one that's in kindergarten. So suffice it to say, I've got a pretty broad spectrum of what parenting looks like with a very busy household. As a Catholic parent and someone who was raised Catholic myself, wow, this really has reaffirmed my faith through the lens of being a parent. Let me give you an example. I went to Catholic school. I grew up for the first 9 years in school, surrounded by mostly Catholics. And so that's pretty much what I knew. And I was taught from day one about the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. That can be secular, as we learn that in kindergarten and preschool. We're always taught to learn to be compassionate and empathetic and think about how your actions and your words affect other people, or how your actions or your words can lift others. And I always thought that was just something you learn in kindergarten. But it is also something you learn as an early Catholic. I wholeheartedly believe if my children can exemplify the golden rule in their everyday lives, the tremendous impact they would make in the world. They would have the opportunity to just give that gift back to others and also receive that gift of empathy, of compassion. So having someone like Pope Leo or even Pope Francis became the Pope. My oldest son was maybe 2. I was just beginning the parent journey. Like a lot of other people of my faith, I would say, the Zennials, the Millennials, a lot of us went through a period of really questioning what is Catholicism. Many of us had left the church for one reason or another, just based on internal conflicts within what we were taught as Catholics versus what is really the world around us. So it was a really interesting time to be a young parent and have this breath of fresh air in this Pope Francis that came along and said, hey, it all comes down to the golden rule, treating others the way you would like to be treated, about charity, about being a good Samaritan, for example, thinking about how might we lift others? How might we be charitable, but not braggarts? Like that whole rule about not letting the left hand know what your right hand is doing. That's what the Franciscans really lived for. And ever since then, I mean, I felt like that has really strengthened my foundation in my own faith. More so with this Pope Leo, who super excited. He's American. And that has made me feel more connected to him because I feel like he can speak to me directly as an American. But on the other hand, it also is poignant the way he can bring those ideals full circle and speak to not only the Zennials and the Millennials and those of us that are finding our way back to the church, but also our own youth, our own children, and seeing that through their eyes.
Let's talk about some of the things that you think that Protestants don't understand very much about Catholics and vice versa. What are some of the things that you heard growing up, and what are also some of the things that you wish that Protestants knew about Catholics?
Okay, so again, I didn't go to public school until I was in college. Like I had some Protestant friends. I have some Protestant family members, but not very many. It's very much in the minority, let alone other religions as well. Some of the funny things that really strike me, I knew some folks that were not Catholic, and they would always challenge me like, well, I need you to recite this Bible verse word for word. Oh, heck no. You could not, no. We paraphrase. I can probably just recite a little bit of Corinthians. Love is patient, love is kind, blah, 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 and I can paraphrase the rest of it. So that is, I think, one funny thing that I always got called on as a kid is like, I didn't know the Bible. I didn't know the Bible. As Catholics, yes, we have the same Bible. There's different versions where King James, I think, is our official version. We don't bring the Bible with us to church. We have a little missalette that you can read verbatim.
I don't know that word.
Yeah. Oh, great. So a missalette is a little book, and it goes by what we call the liturgical year. And it's literally like cliff notes on the Mass. That's what we do. We go to church and we'll pull open the missalette that's in our pew, and we'll open it up, and it'll say 17th Sunday in Ordinary Time, and this is April 7th, 2025. Right? We go to that Mass, and it will literally have verbatim the first reading, some sort of response, like it's usually in the form of song or psalm. It's from the Psalm, Book of Psalms. So when people would say, oh, you don't read the Bible, a lot of us Catholics, you would retaliate. So we're not Bible babies. We're not Bible babies. You know how to recite, but do you really know how to be Christian? Like, do you live it on the daily?
Interesting. A lot of those rituals that you mentioned is actually very similar to my experience when I go to mainline Protestant churches. So a mainline Protestant church is more some Episcopalian churches, Methodist or Lutheran, some Presbyterian. And there's a lot of Catholic liturgy. I don't know if I'm allowed to call it Catholic liturgy, but it sounds similar. So there's the kneeling and there's the procession, and coming from an evangelical background, they talk about it's more liturgical. The mainline, it's comfortable for someone who has come from a Catholic faith tradition. And I would assume then also people who are in Protestant mainline traditions would feel comfortable in a Catholic Mass.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mentioned to you this before, but I'll mention this on the podcast. I went to a public school in California, public university, a big one, about 40,000 students. This is where I told you I started making friends of different faiths, like not just within Christianity, but outside of Christianity, which was amazing and enlightening and everything that I needed and wanted at the same time.
Yes.
And rightfully so, my parents, being very traditional, always thought that, oh my gosh, she's going to stray. She's going to stray away from her faith and she's going to be lost and not know where to go, or she's going to decide she doesn't want to be Catholic anymore, which for the older generation, huge, huge. My mother guilted me. My mom would always tell me, if I need to go to church and there wasn't a Catholic church, you go to the Episcopal church because it's the closest to Catholicism. And this is my mom, a very, very devout Catholic, telling me it's okay to find a church that's as close to Catholicism, but be respectful. And she told me this too. She's like, you're not to go to their communion because you didn't go through whatever you needed to do to be able to do that. But you can sit and you can reflect and you can hear the word and you can feel part of a community that's close to your own. And for my mother to say that was very profound. And I think that was the very beginning of when I started to understand where Catholics fit in the spectrum of Christianity.
Why do you still spend time and investment in this faith?
It really is part of my culture. And so for me to pass this to my children is really continuing my culture as a Catholic. And there's a little bit of a gray area about Filipino and being Filipino Catholic, or being Catholic and being part of a Catholic community, whether or not it's Filipino or not. There's a certain culture that exists there. There's a belonging. And it all ties us. It's like the tie that binds. You can talk to a Catholic that is a boomer. You can talk to a Catholic that's a Gen Alpha. And there is that tie that binds. And so a lot of that is cultural. And that's what keeps me in my faith. And number two, it's the community. It really is. It is a wonderful community. Despite all of the things that we hear in social media, it is really the community of people that you choose. It's a family that you choose. And as an adult and as a parent, I am realizing this more and more now than I ever was as a child. And I'm grateful to my parents for being strict on me as a Catholic. That doesn't mean I'm going to be strict on my kids. Do I go to church every Sunday? Don't tell my mom. No. Not when there's a basketball tournament. But at the same time, I want to give my children the opportunity to explore Catholicism in their own way. And I have one that is an altar server, very huge in terms of volunteering the time as a youth to the church. And that's by his own choice. I never put that in his head. So yeah, I think that really fundamentally is what really defines me as a Catholic. The community and the culture.
I'm curious about what you think about this. In the Protestant side, we don't have like one head of the church. So there's all these people. So what I've been loving is that when J.D. Vance, as a Catholic, will come out and say some ridiculous stuff that is absolutely against our Christian faith, we have had a pope in Pope Leo that has come out and said, actually, like, that is not Christian doctrine. That is not Catholic doctrine. I've been very grateful for Pope Leo to be talking about how we should be treating immigrants and reminding them of that point of view. How has that been, watching like all the atrocities happening in our country and in our world put on by our own government, and then watching how like Pope Leo has been handling that?
First of all, going back to your statement about J.D. Vance and this whole concept of taking care of your own family first, and just this whole concentric circle idea, I'm just going to speak for myself. I find that to be wildly contradictory to not only Catholics, but Jesus. I thought I had read somewhere that J.D. Vance may have converted to Catholicism, our covenant with God and with Jesus, and us as Christians. And as Catholics, we, in fact, do identify ourselves as Christians. We do
Mhm.
use the terminology Christianity in our prayers and our teachings and how we study our faith. But I want to say the very definition of Christianity is being Christ-like.
Yes.
For me as a Catholic, I find that really difficult to accept. Very confined boundaries by which who we are supposed to give our love to. Because my opinion, being Christ-like is treating your stranger like your brother, is treating the person that has come over to seek asylum, to get a better life, to escape tyranny, as someone who wouldn't you welcome them into your home? And I know it's not that simple to think about immigration in that sense, but all the same, I think that is where I have a difference of opinion from how JD Vance chooses to communicate as a Catholic. This is an N of one. This is me really saying that. But at the heart of it, like that is why I do question sometimes politicizing faith and politicizing Christianity, politicizing Catholicism. And I agree with you. It's so interesting to have a world leader who proclaims himself as Protestant, and then you have a vice president underneath him who proclaims himself as Catholic. Yet the rhetoric, it just doesn't seem like it fits either of those bills. I have a hard time identifying with it in all truth.
Mhm.
And it could fundamentally be just how we as Catholics read, understand, quote unquote, adopt scripture in our everyday lives.
Hmm.
Like you made a really good example of you're hearing some of these things and in a way you identify it with just the evangelical or some of the more fundamental aspects of Christianity, Revelations, et cetera, et cetera. I'll just be the first to tell you, Revelations isn't something that we generally talk about as Catholics. We don't. We acknowledge it's there, right? We acknowledge parts of the Bible have been written not necessarily to take verbatim, but necessarily to understand the essence of the story, to understand that at the end of the day, how we can be most Christ-like and how we can have our acceptance into heaven or the afterlife or into the gates of heaven or what have you, really comes from what we're doing every single day and not necessarily waiting for the end of days or waiting for quote unquote holy war or waiting for some rapture or waiting for some sort of thing that are happening, which is interesting. Again, this is something that we know exists from the text. I have a difficult time hearing that and saying, oh, it applies to this, and therefore what is coming out from these leaders in the United States, for example, is true to how I believe as a Christian, if that makes sense.
It does. And it's great
Yeah.
to hear it because we have different lenses and different ways that we all focus on certain parts of the Bible.
We could say in many religions, that's oftentimes the case where you have a book of scriptures, you have the Quran or the Bible or the Torah or whatnot. And then you see these different sects of the religion really hang on to specific aspects of it. We're not alone as Christians in that too. Identify myself most with, am I showing up Christ-like in what I'm doing every day? Or on days when I'm not, when I make mistakes and I fail and I sin, or I am not being empathetic to other people, or I'm not being helpful, or I'm being selfish. Like, how am I self-reflecting so I can be my better self tomorrow? I'm not damned.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Like, until I die, am I feeling like I'm living Christ-like? And it's not for anyone else to decide whether I go to heaven or not. It's between me and the man upstairs.
You are Filipino and Chinese American. I would just love to hear a little bit more about how you find that having more than one culture lends perspective to the way that you experience the world and also to the way that you experience your faith.
I get asked this all the time, to be honest with you. A funny, like, intersection of different upbringings that I have. From a heritage standpoint, I am Filipino Chinese. My dad, who's Chinese, was born and raised in the Philippines. And I joke because culturally, we are Filipino, but superstitiously, we are Chinese, right? And
Interesting.
so, of course, being Catholic is very central to majority of Filipinos. Greater than 90% of Filipinos are Catholic. And so I want to say there's this interesting almost blend, and there's no beginning or no end of like, how Filipino am I and how Catholic am I? Because we're kind of the same in a lot of ways. So a lot of cultural aspects of being Filipino center around the church. The ritual of getting up in the morning, going to mass, having that hour singing songs. Filipinos love to sing. That's just being stereotypical, but I am part of that stereotype. Singing all the songs, which seem maybe stodgy, but I'll tell you, there's a resurgence on TikTok called Catholic bangers. And so that was all really part of my culture. The Chinese aspect, not as much. A lot of it has to do with the fact that my dad was born and raised in the Philippines, but we also live by Lunar New Year, right? Like that's like a little fun factoid that we like to kind of spread around it as Filipino Chinese, but my kids are more Chinese. So it's interesting to see how culturally they're being influenced by not only their side of the family or my husband's side of the family, but also the fact that we live in the Bay Area and it's such a strong Chinese culture as well. As far as being American, that is to this day something I feel incredibly proud of and privileged. And I say that with a capital P, privileged to be born as an American. And I feel like that comes with a certain sense of responsibility to be American and to really live that quote unquote American dream that every immigrant family member or even ancestor or even ancestors of my neighbors have come to this country to find that American dream. And so I feel like it has its own weight. There's a certain pride, but there's also a very, very strong weight and responsibility to be American. And I felt that way ever since I was little, ever since I knew that the world around us sometimes looks to the United States, looks up to the United States, maybe in more present times, maybe looks down on the United States, but we're here. We're here. That's fundamental to who I am culturally as well, like culturally American. What does that mean to me? And so I find sometimes conflict with how we as Americans are portrayed to the rest of the world. And I wish I could scream to the mountaintop, that's not me. That's not me.
Yep. I do that a lot on this podcast.
You get it.
Yeah.
And I feel like every day I'm having to come to terms with myself and saying like, am I still proud to be American? Am I still feeling privileged to be American? Do I still feel like sense of duty as an American? Do I still feel that amount of sense of responsibility, I guess, more than anything? Right? And what am I going to do from my little stool that I stand on as an American culturally that's going to transcend beyond me? On top of it, the children of immigrants experience as well. Like that's so colorful to be an American. And it makes me sad to hear, about how we're trying to constantly define what it means to be American and what it means to be an immigrant or a lawful immigrant and not a criminal immigrant. Like I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot to take in. But I want to say most people come to the United States, have been coming to the United States for this ideal that are we living it right now? I don't know.
Sometimes I've been wondering lately about people who've been having like this anti-immigrant feeling or backlash that like, I'm like, maybe they don't live near people who are that different than them. Like maybe they're not in community with people who are different than them. And I was thinking about how we're so lucky to live in the Bay Area because we live in a place that you're not going to be around people who all have had the same life experience as you. It's not possible. Like, I don't know how you could do that. I don't know about your kids, but I've been thinking lately just about dropping my kids off at a public school and the fact that like, there's just these kids that are all like together playing and some of their parents are from Israel and some are from Palestine and some are from Ukraine and some are from Russia and some are from China and some are from the United States, right? And, we've got Irish and Finnish and Dutch and German and Thai, just like truly all of these beautiful people coming from such different places, and yet we somehow seem to get along great. And our children look at each other and they don't necessarily know all of the chaos of the world yet, but they just look at each other and go, that's my friend.
Yeah.
That's my friend.
We're so lucky, Alexis. We are so lucky where we live. If you're listening and you haven't been out this way to the Bay Area, like it is truly a melting pot, and it's exactly as you described. It confounds me. And maybe that's where the place of ignorance on my part comes from, because I live in an area where you just don't really fathom it. Although I do have a story to share with you, not personal, but I remember reading this, gosh, in the early days of the pandemic. And yes, this was in the Bay Area. This was in a city in the peninsula where there was a Filipino family, early days of the pandemic, Filipino family in line at the grocery store, 6 feet apart from everybody else with their face masks on, if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a story about an older Caucasian woman who was just, I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was stress induced, or I don't know. It was a very tumultuous time, but she basically was blaming the Asians for our current state of affairs, which was COVID-19, right? And that made me really feel aghast. Like, how can this happen? This is the Bay Area. Like, this is Daly City. Daly City is 90% Filipino. And, like, how could you think that we brought COVID? It was just, we still get that. We still get pockets of that. And I'd like to say that it's a blessing and a curse in a way that we see more of these things now. And I say this because there really have been people all over the world who have had that sentiment against people of other cultures, but have suppressed it because maybe have felt the minority, or maybe have felt it's not the right place to say so, that have felt sadly empowered to be more upfront and be more forceful with saying very nasty things to people that aren't of the same culture. And I don't know, I just feel like more and more it's leadership. It's becoming more and more acceptable to do so. And so for this woman in Daly City, 90% Asian American, Southeast Asian immigrant population, to have felt emboldened, wow, that really stuck with me.
That's really interesting to me. Can you talk to me about how you understand what it means to be Christ-like? I'll give you an example. In the extremist fundamentalist spaces right now, in some circles of what it means to be a Protestant in America, there is this thing going around called toxic empathy. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's actually a sin of empathy. Like, to be empathetic is sinful. If you're too empathetic, then you're going to tolerate sin. So that's one thing. And then another thing is to be Christ-like. There is this concept, think of Pete Hegseth, and there's like a violent Jesus. It's this retribution. It actually comes from some of the Revelation images. But I'm curious to you, what does it mean as a Catholic to be Christ-like?
It simply means to be without judgment, really. You said toxic empathy is a new term to me. Hadn't really heard that, but as you're defining it, at the end of the day, who am I to judge? The best I can do is try to model and live my life in a way that will make others feel compelled or bring others along with me in that positive light. Going back to being a parent, I can tell my kids till I'm blue in my face, this is right and this is wrong, and this is right and this is wrong. And at the end of the day, they're their own individuals, and I can only instill a sense of morality that speaks to them. I can't will it upon them, but the best way I can do that is to live by that example. And then at the end of the day, if my children are going to stumble and fail, that's on me to decide how accepting will I be of that. And at the end of the day, how can I be there for my kids in that empathetic way, not overlooking their sin, but continuing to guide them, but also knowing that it's not It's not my judgment. It's ultimately God. It's ultimately Jesus that will judge what I have done with my life or what my kids will do with their lives.
Yeah, I mean, toxic empathy is ridiculous. It's so
Yeah.
antithetical to Jesus. So,
Interesting term. It's like
yeah,
trying to force a label onto something. Yeah.
yeah, but it is out there and it's influencing people. And that's why it's great to learn from you and what your experience has been as a Catholic. If Jesus were here, seeing the racism that I'm going to argue comes from a lot of people that would probably also say out of the next side of their mouth that they are Christian, what do you think Jesus would probably be feeling right now?
I can't put myself in Jesus's shoes, but I would imagine there'd be some sense of despair there because he's probably thinking, my father didn't put me on this earth to die for only one specific type of person's sins. My father didn't ask me to only collect disciples that were already inherently just like me. You look at Jesus's 12 apostles and where they came from and the different walks of life. You had fishermen, you had tax collectors, you had people from all over that he just accepted to be part of his disciples and his apostles. I don't think that he was specifically looking for one type of person. I would hope he's very disappointed right now because that's probably not at all in what he intended for us or what God had intended for us. The altruistic part of me is like, maybe this is all for a reason. You keep saying like, there is a lesson to be learned here. That's what keeps someone like myself going. Is this really a true test of my faith? Is this really testing to see, can I continue to live by the golden rule, Christ-like, despite all of this adversity? Maybe this is our test. Maybe this is our test of our true Christian faith. It's how do we continue to live Christ-like in whatever way, shape, form we have, despite all these challenges.
It'd be a kinder world, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
We just started with golden rule and try to live by that every day. Johanna Ta, my friend, thank you so much for sharing with us today. And thank you for being on the Sacred Slope.
You're so welcome. This has been fun. I appreciate you having me.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on the Sacred Slope. If you'd like to nominate a pastor, priest, or clergy member anywhere in the world, send me an email at alexis@thesacredslope.com. Music was by Brett Rutledge, Eddie Irvin, and Sean Spence. May the fruit of the Spirit guide you this week. I'm Alexis Rice. Go in peace, friends. Oh, okay, and one more thing. Have you guys checked out on Instagram Padre Guillermo? I'm so sorry if I mispronounced it. I think it's Padre Guillermo. It's PADRE.GUILHERME. He has 2.7 million followers. And you guys, if you want good music, he goes around the world doing raves of peace. And it is spectacular. I want to interview him someday. So if anybody knows him, let me know. And I want to go to one of his parties because this is the joy and peace of the gospel. So if you're looking for some good Christian music, this is some good stuff. I'll put it in the show notes.
We want peace.
Oh, and if you like this content, make sure to follow The Sacred Slope on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Threads, TikTok, and Blue Sky at The Sacred Slope. You can watch on YouTube or Spotify, and you can listen on Apple and everywhere you get your podcasts. Till next time.